Boldwood presents The Last Days of Us, written by Caroline Finnerty and read by Avna Manser-Wallace. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. This is the story of us, my family, JP, Harry, Robyn and me, my whole world. We were once just like any other family. Life was a mundane tangle of school runs, after-school activities, a never-ending laundry pile and bedtime stories. But it was my ordinary life, and I treasured every minute of it. You know those beautiful moments, the ones where you step outside yourself for a split second to appreciate what you have and just soak it all up? Where you recognise that this snapshot in time is utterly perfect, where your heart swells and you know that this is the very place you have been waiting to reach your whole life. This is where you are meant to be, and this is what it's all about. But then, there are sometimes defining moments where things can change instantly, splitting your life into before and after, and you know nothing will ever be the same again. I'm glad that I didn't know then that my world was set to fall apart. Chapter 1. Cinnamon and nutmeg floated on the sugar-scented air, entwined with the smell of cloves and star anise. It was Christmas Eve, and the children and I were in the kitchen making gingerbread men to leave out for Santa Claus. Mince pies were baking in the oven, and mulled wine was brewing on the hob for JP and me to drink later on, after the kids were tucked up in bed. I had been looking forward to this day for weeks. To me, Christmas Eve was the best day of the whole year. I loved the anticipation, the piney smell of the real, never fake, noble fir tree, the aromas wafting from the kitchen, the excitement written on the kids' faces. Christmas Eve was like a beautifully wrapped present as you waited to reveal the gift of Christmas Day. I had an image in my head of the perfect Christmas, almost like an image from a catalogue. I knew I was a hopeless dreamer, but I couldn't help but get swept up in the merriment of it all. I helped Robyn, my 4-year-old daughter, to press her cutter down into the dough as Judy Garland's caramel-smooth voice was singing "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" on the radio. Have yourself a merry little Christmas, make the Yuletide gay. Next year all our troubles will be miles away. I sang along, but didn't quite reach the high notes like Judy. Do you think Santa likes gingerbread? Harry asked from underneath a cloud of icing sugar. Well, he's eaten it every year that we've made it for him, and we've never had any customer complaints, I joked. He laughed, showing large, gappy teeth. His adult teeth were starting to fill in the spaces where the baby teeth had been pushed out. They still looked too large in his small mouth. It was as though his face was playing catch-up. A trace of freckles that had appeared in the summertime still dotted the bridge of his nose. At 9 years old, my boy was growing up fast. Too fast, I thought with a sigh. Can I make a gingerbread lady? Robyn asked. Of course not, Harry retorted. They're called gingerbread men. We can have gingerbread men and women, I said in a bid to keep the peace. We're all about equal opportunities in this family. Oh, can they have a little boy and a little girl like our family, Mammy? Robyn asked with wide-eyed excitement. Sure, sweetheart. She used a chubby hand, with its knuckles softened by baby fat, to push her soft golden curls out of her eyes and grinned up at me. I watched her whole face screw up in concentration as her small fingers attempted to cut out the gingerbread family. Her fingers were still so young, she was just learning to grip and fold as she tried to ply the dough to make mini gingerbread children. I stopped to look at the scene before me, like an observer in my own life. It was at moments like these that Harry and Robyn still made me catch my breath. My son and daughter stood before me, working together to make treats for Santa. How had I got so lucky? 10 years ago, I would never have believed this scene could be mine, that children could be in my future. I still had to pinch myself that this was real, that these children were ours, JP's and mine. We had longed for our babies so much. We had waited and tried so hard to have them. My sister Fiona always joked that I had wanted a baby since I was 8 years old. I was the girl on our street who would ask the neighbours if I could push their baby around the estate in the pram. So I knew as soon as JP and I had married, I wanted to begin trying for a family of our own. While friends of mine wanted to wait a few years to have some fun times with their new husband first, I had insisted that we start trying on our honeymoon. But despite our initial leap out of the starting blocks, we endured years of gruesome disappointment after gruesome disappointment as we tried to conceive. In the end, JP and I had undergone 6 rounds of IVF to have Harry. Unless you have experienced that gut-wrenching pain that infertility wreaks upon your life, then you have no idea of the hollowed-out feeling you experience as, once more, cramps forewarn you that you have failed yet again, that you have let your husband down, that you are the reason he isn't yet a dad, while the rest of his friends are rejoicing in fatherhood. There were endless injections, drug regimes, blood tests, internal examinations and procedures. We had been tested to our limits, but I could honestly say that all the heartache had been worth it the very moment Harry, a mewling, pink-faced bundle, was placed into my arms. So, JP and I could hardly dare to believe our luck when I had fallen pregnant naturally with Robyn. Harry and Robyn were our precious babies, each a miracle in their own way. I reached over and pulled the 2 of them into a bear hug. "Hey, Ma'am, what are you doing?" Harry said, laughing and wriggling away from me. He was reaching that age where he was starting to get embarrassed by physical affection. "Where's Daddy?" Robyn asked. I glanced at the clock on the fridge door, the door that was covered in the kids' artwork, appointment reminders, school permission slips that needed to be signed, and all the other things that came with children. It was growing dark out. Where was he? He had said he needed to go into the office for a few hours to wrap up a couple of things before the Christmas break. JP was the finance director for a US tech company headquartered in Dublin. I was used to him working long hours to meet deadlines and occasionally needing to go into the office on weekends or public holidays. I hadn't returned to work after maternity leave with Harry. After waiting so long to have him, I couldn't bear to leave him to head back to the rat race. Then Robyn had come along too, and I loved being there with my children for every milestone in their life. I wanted to be there for every tummy ache and scratched knee. I felt very fortunate that JP's salary meant we could afford that choice. JP had said he wouldn't be long, but that had been 4 hours ago. Surely he should be home by now. Then it hit me. He was probably rushing around Dublin city centre trying to buy me a Christmas gift. He was always leaving it until the last minute. I could imagine him now in a sweat, racing through Brown Thomas on Grafton Street, or maybe even Weir's, frantically choosing whatever was left at this time on Christmas Eve, while some predatory sales assistant took full advantage of his desperation. I couldn't help but laugh at the image in my head. "What's so funny?" the kids asked in unison, looking up at me. "Oh, nothing," I said with a wave of my hand. "I think Daddy is probably doing some last-minute Christmas shopping." When we were finished, we loaded the tray of gingerbread men and women into the oven, and I sent the children upstairs to get changed into their new Christmas pyjamas. I briefly wondered how many more years I had left where they would let me dress them in matching nightclothes, but I pushed the thought out quickly again. Just enjoy the moment, Sarah, I told myself. I looked outside where, beyond the window, darkness had fallen. I put a candle in the window, as was the tradition on Christmas Eve. Then I moved around lighting my collection of Christmas-themed candle holders. Every year, JP would groan when I took them out of storage on the 1st of December and set about decorating every shelf, windowsill and mantelpiece in the house. I adored how the yellow candlelight shone through the miniature windows of the pretty little snow-capped houses, or how the nose on my snowman-shaped holder glowed orange when the candle inside it was lit. Outside, I had light-up reindeer grazing in our front garden and multicoloured lights strewn along the trees. JP thought they were kitsch, and they probably were. He preferred the more sophisticated style of our neighbours' white lights and fresh holly wreaths. But I couldn't help going overboard on the Christmas decor because I loved the smile it brought to the kids' faces. I glanced at the clock again. Wouldn't the shops all be closed by now? They always closed a little earlier on Christmas Eve. Where was JP? It would be time for the children to go to bed soon, and he always helped them leave out the treats for Santa and the reindeer before we tucked them up together and read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." A bad feeling washed over me. It wasn't like him to miss this. I really hoped nothing had happened to him. I lifted my phone from the countertop and called him. I waited as it rang for what felt like an age, but he still didn't answer. I prayed he was okay. A sickly feeling of dread snaked its way down my body, and I felt goosebumps prickle all along my arms. Where the hell was he? Chapter 2. I woke with a start. My heart was racing and I felt panicked. Somebody was calling my name. My arm was being pulled. Something terrible had happened. I could sense it like a black veil sitting upon the cool morning air. I opened my eyes and let them adjust to the half-light of the room. "Mammy! Wake up, Mammy! It's Christmas!" Harry and Robyn shouted in unison. "Can we go down and see if Santa has come yet?" Their words jolted me awake. My bedside clock told me it was 5:54 a.m. I turned to wake JP, but the other side of the bed was startlingly cool. It was then that what had happened the night before came crashing down upon me. I had wrapped all the presents for the children, then waited up for JP to come home until I could hardly keep my eyes open anymore. I had lost count of how many times I had dialed his number, but his phone had rung out unanswered. I had called his friends, but nobody had seen him. In desperation, I had even phoned all the Dublin hospitals, but they had confirmed that they hadn't admitted any patients matching his name. "Where's Dad?" Harry asked, looking around the room as if expecting his father to jump out and surprise him. "I'm not sure, sweetheart," I said. I heard the concern lacing my own voice. I could remember still being awake at 3 a.m. and he hadn't come home, and I must have fallen asleep after that. "Come on, Mammy, get up." Robyn tugged my arm again. "We need to see what Santa branged us." "Brought us," I corrected on autopilot. "Okay, I'm coming now." I climbed out of bed and wrapped my ancient, ragged cardigan around me to shield myself from the cold morning air. The wool was bobbly and fuzzy. There were old holes in the sleeves where I was now sticking my thumbs through, and yet I couldn't bear to throw it out. I had been wearing this cardigan for as long as I could remember. It had kept me warm while I studied for my college finals. I had worn it through my pregnancies and had breastfed my babies in it. Every hole in the wool seemed to represent a different chapter in my life. The three of us descended the stairs together, and the smell of stale alcohol hit me from the hallway before we even reached the living room. Disappointment began swirling through my veins like warm liquid, curdling somewhere near my heart. I hesitated at the door, apprehensive of what was waiting on the other side for us. "Come on, Ma'am," Harry said impatiently, noting my hesitation. "We need to see if Santa came." "No, wait, don't go, I raised my hand to stop them, but before I could, the kids had pushed the door open and went running into the room. They froze when they saw their dad passed out on the sofa. He was snoring heavily, and the smell of stale air, a combination of rich food and alcohol, was pungent in the air. In the corner, underneath our Christmas tree, lay the toys they had listed in scrawled handwriting in their letters to Santa, all wrapped up, waiting to be opened. But instead of rushing over to open their presents, they both turned back to me with a mixture of worry and fear filling their eyes. "Why is Dad sleeping here?" Harry asked, looking up at me for answers. I noticed that JP was still dressed in the same trousers and sweater that he had left the house in the day before. His shoes lay kicked off in the middle of the floor. A short glass with a residue of amber-coloured liquid sat on the rug beside them. "Shall we wake him up, Mammy? He's going to miss opening the presents," Robyn said. The same refrain kept shooting through my mind. This wasn't how it was meant to be. It was Christmas morning. It wasn't supposed to be like this. In the run-up to Christmas, I had imagined this moment 1,000 times in my head, and it had never been like this. I stepped over his coat, also thrown on the rug, and shook his shoulder. He grunted and turned over. I shook him again. "JP," I called. "Wake up." There was no sign of life. "JP," I tried again, sterner this time. He woke with a start. "What is it? What's wrong?" He shook himself and began rubbing his eyes.
"Santa came, Dad,"
Robyn announced, looking at me in confusion. "Santa?" He sat up theatrically and looked over to the tree. "Well then, we need to see what he brought for us, don't we?" My heart broke to see relief wash over their innocent little faces. Their eyes darted to me for reassurance, and I quickly arranged my face into a smile. JP jumped up and scooped a giggling Robyn off the floor before hurrying over to the tree with her. Harry ran behind. I followed after them, marvelling at his ease, how he could just turn it on. How could he just switch into fun dad mode while my heart was reeling and my mind was racing with so many questions? Where had he been? What was going on? As the children began unwrapping presents, I felt an overwhelming sense of sadness. I knew my expectations were too high. I blamed the beautifully orchestrated marketing campaigns. In the adverts and films I watched on TV, happy families hugged each other tightly after exchanging their perfectly wrapped gifts. Of course, I knew that life wasn't like a Hallmark movie.
"Look, Dad, Santa brought this one for you," Harry said, thrusting the gift towards him. I watched as JP ripped off the paper decorated in holly leaves that I had wrapped the night before. I had carefully chosen bows to complement the colour of the paper, while he had been God only knew where. He untied the ruby-red grosgrain ribbon before tearing open the paper. He pulled back the box that was inside to reveal a watch. "Wow. Thanks, Santa." He looked over at me. "Happy Christmas," I said. We locked eyes briefly before his darted quickly to the floor. Why couldn't he look at me? He closed the lid of the box and placed the watch back down on the floor. The children continued ripping open their presents until the room was a sea of paper and they were squealing and shouting with glee as Santa ticked off everything on their lists. Soon all the presents were open, but suddenly Robyn's face grew serious. "What's wrong, darling?"
I asked.
"Where's your present, Mummy?"
Although she was only 4, Robyn was my sensitive child. She was always in tune with how everyone else was feeling. "Oh, don't worry. I have loads of things," I said, quickly brushing her off. Harry put his remote-control car down on the floor.
"Santa forgot Ma'am."
He looked crestfallen. I looked over at JP. He was pretending to be engrossed in the instruction leaflet that came with one of Robyn's dolls. "Come on, who's hungry?" I said, forcing myself to sound bright. I didn't want anything else to ruin Christmas morning. I climbed back up from the floor.
Me, me, me!"
the kids chorused, their concern over my lack of presence already forgotten.
"Ma'am."
Harry came up beside me as I took sausages and rashers out of the fridge a few moments later. "Yeah," I said, shutting the fridge door.
"How did Santa come down the chimney if Dad was in the room?"
Here were the questions. I knew they would come. "Well, he must have come before Dad came home."
"But then, why didn't Dad wake us up when he saw Santa had come?"
"Well, maybe he came when Daddy was asleep," I tried.
"But why didn't Daddy sleep in your bed with you?"
"Look, why don't I see if I have any batteries for that remote-controlled car?" I said, trying to change the subject. I walked past him into the utility room, where JP was standing reading something on his phone. He quickly slipped it into his back pocket when he saw me. "Where were you last night?" I asked. "You said you were going into work for a few hours, and then you never came home." He turned away from me. "I was out." "I was worried about you."
I was whispering so the kids wouldn't hear. Couldn't you have called me and let me know you were okay? I've had to field a load of questions from them. Will you stop nagging me? It's Christmas morning, for God's sake. I felt hot tears filling my eyes, stinging and burning with their ferocity. I didn't understand what was happening. I was worried about his behaviour. I guess if I was honest with myself, he had been acting strangely for a while now. He had been short-tempered and disinterested in everything I said. Mammy, what are you and Daddy talking about? Harry came into the utility room and was looking at both of us for an answer. I could see the worry pooling in his eyes. Nothing, sweetheart, I said, quickly brushing my tears away, leaving my cheeks damp. After we had eaten breakfast, I went upstairs to shower and change before our guests arrived. We were having JP's parents, Joan and Richard, for Christmas dinner, and my sister Fiona and her partner Sean were going to join us too. As our mother and father were both dead, we always spent Christmas together. I knew JP's parents would be calling straight after Mass, so I needed to hurry. I was just putting on a little makeup to disguise my tired eyes when I heard the doorbell go downstairs. A few seconds later, I could see Harry screaming, "Granny and Grandad are here!" "Mum, Dad, Happy Christmas!" I could hear JP sing from the hallway as he welcomed them into our family home. I took a deep breath inwards to calm myself before heading downstairs to greet them. "Happy Christmas," I said, forcing myself to smile. My father-in-law, Richard, was carrying gifts, and we attempted an awkward hug around his full arms. My mother-in-law, Joan, handed me a poinsettia in one hand and her coat in the other without even a greeting. "Can I get you both a drink?" I asked, following them all into the living room. "Well, it is Christmas morning," Richard said in a jubilant tone. "Sure, we might as well." "You're looking a little tired, John Paul," Joan remarked. "Were the children up very early?" She only ever called him by his full name, never the abbreviated version. "Just before 6, he yawned. "I remember those days," Joan laughed. I disappeared into the kitchen, glad at the opportunity to have a moment alone to compose myself. I had to get it together. It was Christmas Day. I couldn't let what had happened earlier ruin the whole day for everyone. I plastered a smile on my face and returned to the living room a few minutes later with a bottle of champagne and the flutes I kept for special occasions. I noticed they had already started exchanging gifts without me. "Look, Mammy, look what Granny got me," Robyn cried, holding up a frozen board game. "Oh, wow, that's amazing. Say thank you to Granny." "Thank you, Granny," she repeated. JP took the bottle from me and began uncorking it. The kids squealed as the cork popped and the golden champagne frothed over the rim of the bottle. He began to fill everyone's glasses. "To family," he toasted, and for a moment, we almost looked happy. Chapter 3. We had just seen off our guests, and I was in the kitchen with the lights dimmed low. JP was tucking the kids up in bed. They were exhausted from the day. Robyn had fallen asleep on the sofa, clutching her new baby Annabelle doll in one hand and her beloved Mr. Bunny in the other. And Harry's eyes had been drooping closed as he tried his best to stay awake. I was standing at the sink, my sleeves pushed up, scrubbing the roasting tins with Brillo pads. My shoulders burned with knots, and I was drained from the day, not helped by the lack of sleep the night before. Sinead O'Connor was softly crooning her version of Silent Night on the radio in the background, and the hairs on my arms stood to attention as her voice soared to catch the high notes. JP came back down the stairs, and I swung around from the sink. "That went well, then?" I said sardonically as he entered the kitchen. I was referring to our Christmas dinner when I had noticed my mother-in-law using her knife and fork to lift up her meat. She had flipped it over on the plate, examined it, and then done the same again on the other side. "Maybe it's my eyesight," Joan had said, raising her glasses to her eyes. "I'm not great if the light is a bit dark, but mine's looking a bit pink. Here, have a look, John Paul," she'd said, sliding the plate towards him. "What do you think?"
Yeah, I see what you mean, ma'am, he had said, peering down at the plate. Really? I'd said, trying to keep my cool. JP rarely cooked, so he wasn't the best person to judge. I had spent hours preparing this meal for our family with very little help, and I was tired. I don't think I undercooked it. In fact, the opposite was true. I had overcooked it. It had been a bit on the dry side, if I was being completely honest with myself. I had leaned across the table to look at her meat, which to my eye was perfectly cooked. It was milk white. I think it's okay, Richard had said, taking another bite. It's delicious, Sarah. Fiona, my ever-loyal sister, had added. It is, Sean had agreed. I won't risk it, Joan had said, shaking her head and pushing the plate away. An undercooked turkey is very dangerous, you know. Well, I can see if I have another slice, I had offered, pushing my chair back and standing up to leave the table. No, you're okay. She had sat back and folded her arms across her lap. I'm not very hungry now. I'll eat the meat, Mammy, Robyn had said, sensing the tension in the room. Why didn't you stick up for me earlier? I demanded now from JP. You could see that the turkey was perfectly cooked. I looked at him, willing him to say something to acknowledge what had happened during dinner earlier, but infuriatingly, he just shrugged his shoulders at me. I felt anger warm my veins. That's it? I asked in disbelief. That's all you're going to say? I put so much effort into this day, making sure everyone had the presents they wanted, cooking for us all. You should have backed me up. You knew the meat was perfectly fine. Stop playing the martyr, Sarah. Can you just leave it out for once? He sighed heavily, walked over to the fridge and took out a beer bottle. I felt as though my heart had stopped. Something had changed between us, and I hadn't noticed when. The way he was looking at me right now, it was almost as if he hated me, but I couldn't recall doing or saying anything that might have offended him. He raised the beer to his lips and took a long, slow gulp. I peeled off my rubber gloves and tossed them onto the draining board. I turned around to give him my full attention. What's going on with us, JP? My voice trembled. I don't understand why you're acting like this. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed to stick on his lips, and he swallowed them back down again. What is it? What's happening here? I pushed again, taking a seat at the table. I needed to sit down. My body seemed so heavy. Is there something on your mind? If you tell me what is wrong, then maybe I can help. My tone was softer now. He rubbed his hands down his face before shaking his head. JP, what's wrong? You're scaring me. This isn't like you. I'm so worried about you. I can't keep living like this. It's horrible. I felt as though I was a passenger in an out-of-control car and didn't know the destination. Me neither, he said, shaking his head. There was something in his tone warning me. I was crossing a line, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what awaited me on the other side, but I had no choice but to continue. What do you mean? I'm not in love with you anymore, Sarah. He mumbled so low that I wondered if I had misheard him. Sorry? I said, thinking I couldn't be hearing him right. It was like his words had come out all jumbled up, all wrong. I needed to hear them again so I could put them the right way around. I haven't been in love with you in a very long time. He was looking down at the floor, pawing at the tiles with the toe of his shoe. The words hit me with the sudden shock of a wasp sting as I realised what he was saying to me. But why? Why are you saying this? I was reeling. His words were rubber ping-pong balls, and they were bouncing off my brain because my head couldn't process them. I don't want this anymore. I think it's best for everyone if I move out, give us both some space to figure out what we really want, he continued. But you can't. We're your family, JP. Me, Harry and Robyn, we're your family. You can't walk out on us. The whole thing seemed preposterous. What was going on inside his head? It didn't make sense. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I really tried. For a long time, I've tried to make it work, but I can't do it anymore.
You can't do what?
I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't want to do this on Christmas Day, but I can't keep on living a lie. I think it's best for everyone if I move out for a while.
I felt panicked, as if I was slipping further down under currents of oily water, and I couldn't break through the surface as I thought of the implications, not just for me, but for the kids too. They were my world. Why wasn't he being rational? If something broke, you fixed it. You didn't just cast it out, especially when you had spent 15 years of married life with that person. Please, JP. Please, I don't understand. Just tell me what I've done. We can work it out. Whatever is wrong, we can try to fix it. I begged. He shook his head.
I've made up my mind.
But what about the kids? What are we meant to tell them? How are we going to explain it to them?
I'm not sure, he admitted, but kids are tougher than we think. Yes, it will be hard on them at the start, but they'll be okay. We'll sit them down in the morning and explain it to them.
I couldn't understand why he was being so heartless, so cruel. This wasn't like him. This wasn't the JP that I knew and loved. Was this some kind of midlife crisis? But where will you go?
I'm not sure yet.
You can't do this. They need you. We need you. We can try counselling. Loads of couples need counselling. Why can't we try that? I pleaded in a small voice that didn't even sound like my own. Although we hadn't been getting on for some time now, I just hadn't seen this coming. I felt totally blindsided. The room was spinning around me. A juggernaut had jackknifed through my life, my world, my family, my heart, and I couldn't stop it.
Please, JP, don't do this, I wailed. I'm sorry, Sarah, I can't.
Then it suddenly hit me. His unexplained absence the night before, the way he was always checking his phone, the way he wouldn't look me in the eye lately. Is there someone else? Is that what this is about?
I'll sleep on the sofa.
And then he turned and walked out of the room. Chapter 4. I woke to find my head pressed against the table. It took me a second to work out why I was asleep in the kitchen, and then the crushing realization of what had happened the night before hit me like a punch. I had sat at our kitchen table crying until everything was raw. My skin was raw from salty tears, my throat was raw from heaving sobs, my heart was raw from the slash of JP's words. The washing was still piled up in the sink from when it had been abandoned the evening before. JP had taken up residence on the sofa, and as I heard snores coming from the living room, I'd wondered how on earth he was able to sleep. I'd stayed sitting at the table until the light outside changed from the black dark of night to the pinky orange shades of dawn. How I wished I could stop time from marching forward. I longed to be able to hold back the day because I knew what was awaiting our children when they woke. Our children who were our world. Or at least, I had thought they were. We weren't just husband and wife, we were parents. I always believed we had had an implicit, unspoken pact that we would never do anything to hurt them. Whenever we heard stories about marriages disintegrating or people walking out on their families, I thought we were both in agreement that we would never do something like that. We could never do such a thing to our children. We were better than that. So where had it changed for JP? Was our unspoken agreement just in my head? Maybe it had been one-sided. Had it been only my pact all along? They say that infertility is one of the biggest stresses that a marriage can face, but not for us it wasn't. We rode that storm out together, so as I sat at my kitchen table, I was racking my brain to figure out where it had all gone so wrong for us. How had we fought our biggest battle and won, but defeat was yet to come? The dawn sky was now alive with the chorus of morning song, the birds welcoming the arrival of a new day. A new day that I wished my children didn't have to face. This was to be a turning point in their lives, a watershed moment that would define everything from here on in. This would be the day that they would learn that their mother and father were not the rock that they had once thought. The core was about to be ripped out of their world. Just after 7, I heard footsteps on the stairs, and Harry came into the kitchen, his sandy hair sticking up chaotically from sleep. "Ma'am, you're up before me." He was usually the first person up. He would normally stick on the TV or play on his tablet for a little while, sometimes helping himself to biscuits, while JP and I slept on a bit longer. "You know I love you so much, don't you?" I said, hearing the emotion thread my voice. "Of course." He wrinkled his nose in that way he had that was so like his father as he tried to figure out what was going on. Robyn came down the stairs next. She burst through the door, and when she saw me sitting at the table, ran straight into my arms and climbed up on my knee. "Did you sleep well, Robbie Roo?" I asked, brushing her hair back off her forehead. She nodded sleepily in my arms. She was wrapped in her big, fluffy dressing gown and was clasping Mr. Bunny tightly to her chest. I had placed that teddy comforter into her cot on the day she had been born, and she had slept with it every night since. I snuggled my face into her warm neck. She was divine. I looked beyond the patio door to see a robin pecking at the ground. "Look, Robyn," I said, pointing at the small bird. "My birdie!" she cried, leaping up and rushing to get some bread out of the press to feed him. "Me want the story, Mammy." I took a deep breath. "Did you know that we called you Robyn?" I began, as tears welled in my eyes at the memory. "Because on the day that you were born, a robin fluttered down and landed on my windowsill in the hospital, and he looked at me with his dark eyes." I choked, trying desperately to keep my emotions in check. "And I knew then that he was telling me that we had to call you Robyn." She smiled at the familiar story. She never tired of hearing it. JP came into the kitchen then. I still hoped that maybe it had been the alcohol clouding his judgment. He had drunk several glasses of wine with dinner and then had poured himself a large tumbler of whiskey after our guests had gone home. Perhaps he hadn't been thinking straight. He didn't look at me as he walked over to the fridge and filled a glass of water for himself. As the cool water rushed into the glass, I wondered if having the time to think during the night had helped him to see sense. Maybe he had changed his mind, had realised that what he had said was madness, complete madness. "Hi, Dad," Harry sang, as if it was just a normal day. JP turned around from the fridge. "Harry, Robyn, can you sit down for a second?" My heart fell down to my feet. This was it. He wasn't even going to wait until they had eaten breakfast or dressed. The kids looked at me to see what was going on. "Your mammy and I need to talk to you about something," he continued. "No," I screamed in my head. "It's you. You need to talk to them. I don't need to talk to them about anything. I don't need to destroy their lives. You do." "Are we going to Disneyland?" Harry asked, taking a seat at the table. His eyes were full of excited hope, and a big grin spread across his face. I felt an enormous pang in the pit of my stomach. JP looked at me in bewilderment, wondering what was going on. I groaned internally. The ads were on TV again, squashed in between episodes of Pokémon and Peppa Pig, the ones where serious-faced parents sat their children down and then announced grandly that they were actually taking them to Disneyland, resulting in much cheering and whooping from the kids. My heart felt as though it was being squeezed in a vice grip. Harry's voice was so small, so innocent, and I wanted to scoop him up off the chair, run out of this room, and keep him in a world where your parents sitting you down to talk was because they had an exciting surprise for you, not because your dad was leaving the family home. I wanted to lock both children away somewhere where I could stop their universe from being shattered. "What the hell is he talking about?" JP muttered. Harry had clearly put him off course. "I think he means the ads on TV where the parents sit the kids down and tell them they're going to Disneyland," I mumbled. "No, Harry, JP said, shaking his head and looking mildly irritated. "We're not going to Disneyland." "Oh," Harry replied, sinking down again with disappointment. "Then what is it?" "I need to go away for a while," JP said. "With work?" Harry asked, wondering what the big deal was. They were used to their dad travelling with his job. "Not exactly," JP replied. "I need to go and live in another house. Now, you'll still see me all the time, but I just won't be living in this house anymore." "But why do we need two houses?" Robyn asked. "Sometimes grown-ups need their own space," JP said. A fat tear rolled down my cheek. I tried to catch it with my fingertip, but it landed instead on my Christmas jumper that I was still wearing from the day before. The smiley reindeer face with its red light-up nose beaming up at me suddenly felt mocking. "Ma'am, why are you crying? What's going on?" Harry turned to me and demanded an explanation. "We love you," I said, and then I couldn't hold it together anymore. Tears coursed down my face. "We both love you so, so much." "You'll still see me," JP said, glaring at me, his face angry and full of warning for me to keep it together. "I don't want Daddy to go," Robyn stated. "Kiss and make up," she ordered. That's what I always said to her and Harry whenever they fought about something. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." I wiped my cheeks with the back of my hand. JP shoved his chair back with a screech and got up from the table. I heard his footsteps climbing the stairs. "What's going on, ma'am?" Harry asked as he began to cry. "Your dad loves you so much. He just needs a little bit of space," I soothed as I cuddled my two sobbing babies in close to my chest. JP came back down the stairs a short while later with a large suitcase in his hands. It was part of a set that we had got as a wedding present. We had taken them on honeymoon with us, and every family holiday since. "I think I have enough to keep me going for a while here," he said sheepishly. "But where are you going to stay, JP?" I asked. "I'm not sure yet." "Don't go, Dad," Harry said, running over and grabbing onto his father. "The Liverpool match is on today. We can watch it together." My heart tore into shreds. Harry was putting his best case forward to get his dad to stay, but he was too young to understand that, if we weren't enough, a Liverpool match wasn't going to cut it. JP made for the door, but Harry gripped him tighter. "No, Dad," he said, clinging to JP's leg. "I don't want you to go. Neither does Mammy or Robyn. Isn't that right, Ma'am?" Tears choked in my throat, and I couldn't answer him. How could JP be so heartless? "Tell him, Ma'am," Harry begged. "Tell him you don't want him to go." His eyes were beseeching me to stop all of this craziness. "It's okay, Harry," JP said. "I'll see you both really soon." "Please, JP, just think about it. Think about what you are doing. Think about the kids. If you can't stay for my sake, stay for theirs at least." I stepped forward and placed my hand on his arm in a last-ditch appeal. "Don't make this any harder than it needs to be, Sarah." He brushed off my hand and headed out the door to his car. We all followed after him, watching as he opened the boot using his key fob. He rejigged his golf clubs to make room for the case. Then he slammed the boot shut and climbed into the car. He didn't look at the three of us as he reversed out of the driveway and out of our lives. Harry. I don't know what is happening. Dad has gone away, and I don't know how long he's going to be away for. He said it's just for a while, but he even took the suitcases that we always take on our holidays. I asked Mam if he was gone on holidays too, but she shook her head and started crying and said she didn't know, so I think it's really bad. If Mam doesn't even know what's happening, then how am I supposed to know what is going on? Robyn thinks he's just gone to work, but that's because she's only 4, so she doesn't really understand things like I do. Mam was crying again today. She's always crying, and she thinks I can't see her when she hides in the kitchen or she pretends she's getting something out of the fridge, And her voice goes all funny when I ask her a question, but I'm not stupid. I'm way better at hiding when I cry than she is. She never sees me crying in my room. It's all Dad's fault that everyone is crying. The house is all weird now, and I don't like it. I just want him to come home, and then everything can be the same again. Chapter 5. When I woke the next morning, it hit me fresh again. It was surreal, like I was an actor in a film. This wasn't my life. This wasn't JP. This wasn't my JP. St. Stephen's Day had gone past in a blur. I don't know how long I had stood on our cobble-lock driveway for after he left, but it was long enough to see our next-door neighbour's blind twitching as she wondered what was going on. We lived in Seaway Close, a small housing estate in Malahide, a suburb on the north side of Dublin, where neat, detached, red-bricked houses fronted onto a small green. Our neighbours were mainly older couples whose children had flown the nest. I would invite them all around for barbecues every summer, but other than exchanging polite greetings when I met them on the street, I didn't know them well. I had brought the children back into the house, and we had all sat shell-shocked on the sofa. Usually we spent the day with just the four of us taking it easy after the pressure of hosting our families on Christmas Day. We would eat the turkey and ham leftovers, then the kids would chill out with their selection boxes by the fire and watch a movie, while JP and I shared a bottle of red wine and ate cheese. But instead, the three of us had stayed in our pyjamas all day, curled up together on the sofa. The children had so many questions for me, questions that I wasn't able to answer. Where had Daddy gone? When would he be home? Why did he take our suitcases? Had he just gone on holiday? I had my own questions. Did he just need space away from his marriage for a while? Or had he fallen out of love with me? Perhaps it was stress. I knew he was under a lot of pressure in work. The company hadn't met their targets for the financial year, and as the person responsible for reporting directly to the US, it was weighing heavily on him. Had it all got on top of him, and this was his way of coping? I was racking my brain for a reason for all of this. More worryingly, a voice in my head kept asking if there might be someone else involved. But no, I really didn't want to let my head go there. When the children had eventually stopped crying that evening, they had fallen asleep on the sofa, their small faces sticky with tears, and I had carried them up to my bed to sleep because I couldn't bear to be alone. JP was the only man I had ever loved. We had met when I was 17 years old, and I was a shy first-year student in Trinity College. We had both studied economics. I still thought it was funny to have worked so hard for that degree, and now all those macro and micro theories that I'd sweated so much over were so irrelevant in my daily life as a stay-at-home mum. I had known JP to see from lectures. You couldn't miss him. He was very good-looking, and my two friends, Linda and Mel, and I, had nicknamed him Johnny Popular, because he was always surrounded by a crowd. JP and I had been paired together for a project, and one day, while we were working on the assignment together, I got a call from Fiona to say Dad had taken ill suddenly at work and had been rushed to St. Vincent's Hospital. JP had listened as I had taken the call, and after I hung up reeling from the shock that had been foisted upon me, the words Dad and hospital tumbled from my mouth. He took control while my head was spinning. He ushered me out to the car park and drove me to St. Vincent's. I don't think I even said goodbye to him as I hurried out of his car and ran through the sliding doors of the hospital. But Dad was already dead by the time I got there, the result of a massive heart attack. He was just 53 years of age. At the funeral, I was shocked to see JP in the long line of mourners who queued to shake our hands. He called me the next day to see how I was, and then the day after that, and every day until I returned to college. When I went back to Trinity, still stunned by my new reality, still grappling with the shock of how fast my world had changed, he would sit with me and put a mug of hot, sugary tea between my hands when I was too full with grief to eat. It was as if my dad had passed JP the baton as he had been leaving this world and sent him to take care of me. So you see, I'd always felt connected to JP on this level. We were more than just boyfriend and